You don't need to shout. You don't need to prove yourself. According to Carl Jung, the most powerful people in any room are often the quietest because they know a secret. Power doesn't come from control. It comes from inner mastery. They don't interrupt. They don't need to. They're not rushing to be heard, to be understood, to dominate the conversation. They wait, watch, observe. And by the time they speak, if they choose to, everyone listens. Not because they demand it, but because their presence already said everything. This is the silent trick Jung understood. Real power isn't external, it's psychological. And those who cultivate it, quietly, invisibly, end up leading without ever needing a throne. Jung believed that most people live on the surface of themselves. They react, they conform, they mirror others. But beneath that, surface is something vast and untapped, the unconscious, the inner landscape. And the person who dares to go there, to explore it, master it, integrate it, becomes different. They stop being ruled by emotion. They stop seeking approval. They stop fighting battles that don't matter. Why? Because they've already fought the hardest one, the battle within. This is where the silent power begins. See, most people think power comes from domination, outperforming, outsmarting, outshouting. But Jung saw through that. He saw that control of the external world means nothing if you're a stranger to your internal one. That's why the silent trick works. It's not about pretending, it's about presence. Because when you're no longer reactive, when you're centered, grounded, integrated, people feel it. Even if they don't understand it, even if they can't explain why, they trust you, or fear you, or follow you, but they always notice you. Jung called this individuation the process of becoming whole, of integrating all your parts, the light and the dark, the known and the hidden, until you're no longer split inside. And once you've done that, you move differently through the world. You're not scattered. You're not desperate. You're not performative. You're complete, and people can't ignore that. That's why the most powerful people often don't chase attention. They attract it, not through manipulation, but through energy, alignment, clarity. They know who they are. And that's rare, because most people are constantly looking for themselves in other people's eyes. Am I good enough? Do they like me? What should I say to be accepted? But when you've done the inner work, when you've faced your fears, your wounds, your ego, you no longer need that. You don't bend yourself to fit the room. The room adjusts to you. That's not arrogance. That's inner peace. And inner peace is magnetic. That's why Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In other words, until you understand yourself fully, you are being ruled by forces you don't even see. But once you see them, once you name them, you reclaim your power. You stop projecting your fears onto others. You stop sabotaging your own success. You stop needing to control people because you finally learn to control yourself. And that control, it's quiet. It doesn't scream. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just is. That's the trick. It's in the way you pause before speaking, the way you look someone in the eye, not to intimidate, but to see, the way you choose your silence, not out of fear, but out of power. Because power, when it's real, doesn't need to shout. This is the essence of the silent trick Jung pointed to. The deeper your self-awareness, the less the external world can throw you off. And that's when you become truly dangerous, in the best way. Because no one can buy you, no one can bait you, no one can manipulate you. You've become sovereign, not over others, but over yourself. And here's what makes this so profound. You don't have to do anything to prove it. Just being in the room shifts the dynamic. Why? Because most people operate from their persona, the mask they wear to fit in. You, on the other hand, operate from yourself, the integrated core that doesn't need a mask. And when a person who is whole walks among people who are fragmented, they feel it. It challenges them, inspires them, sometimes threatens them, but it always leaves an impression. So what's the actual trick? It's this. Withdraw your energy from the need to be seen. Withdraw your energy from performance. Withdraw your energy from trying to convince and redirect it inward, to self-awareness, to mastery, to presence. When you know yourself truly, deeply, you don't chase power. You embody it. You don't argue to be right. You live in truth. You don't compete. You create. And the world, it notices. That's the Jungian secret no one talks about. Power doesn't come from the ego, it comes from the self, the deep, integrated, silent core within you that cannot be shaken. And once you find that center, once you learn to be it, you carry a calmness that cuts through noise, a certainty that doesn't need permission, a stillness that speaks louder than words. That's the silent trick. And once you master it, everything changes. People begin to notice something about you, though they can't quite name it. You walk into a room and something shifts. Conversations soften, eyes turn. There's no dramatic entrance, no performance, but still, your presence lands differently. Not because you're pretending to be powerful, but because you've stopped pretending altogether. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of becoming who you truly are, not the role you play, not the image you project, but the self that exists beneath all that. And once you begin to live from that place, the rules change. You no longer play social games because you've realized how much energy they drain. You see through the masks people wear, not with judgment, but with clarity. Because you wore them once too. And now, having taken yours off, you can never unsee the truth. The truth is this: most people are terrified of being seen. Not the version they curate, but their real, unfiltered essence. Jung understood this fear intimately. It's why so many stay hidden behind persona, the identity built to survive, not to thrive. But the person who's done the inner work no longer hides. They've made peace with their shadow. The parts of themselves they used to avoid, anger, fear, insecurity, shame, have been faced, examined, integrated. They've stopped denying their darkness and in doing so, discovered their depth. That's why their presence carries weight. Not because they're flawless, but because they're whole, and wholeness is rare. In a world obsessed with being liked, the person who's okay with being misunderstood becomes a mystery. While others rehearse what to say, they practice silence. While others posture for dominance, they remain calm, unmoved. That calmness, it's not emptiness, it's power, channeled, inward. And that unnerves people, because silence in the hands of someone who understands themselves isn't passive, it's precise. It chooses when to speak, and when it does, it cuts through the noise like a blade. Not loud, not flashy, just clear. Jung saw that clarity as sacred. The more you understand yourself, the less you need to manipulate the world. You don't seek control, you carry influence. You don't seek attention, you generate respect. And not by effort, but by essence. That's why people start looking to you when things fall apart. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're not rattled by the chaos. You've seen worse inside yourself and made it out the other side. You don't collapse under pressure because your foundation isn't built on approval. It's built on truth. This is how the silent trick unfolds in real time. Someone insults you, you don't react. Someone challenges you. You don't flinch. Someone misunderstands you. You don't scramble to explain. Why? Because your sense of self no longer depends on how others see you. You've broken that dependency. And now you're free. Freedom is the ultimate form of power, but it's not the kind that makes headlines. It's internal, invisible, and irreversible. You can lose your job, your status, your reputation. But if you've done the inner work, you won't lose your center. Because your value isn't borrowed from titles. It comes from knowing who you are when everything else is stripped away. That's why Jung didn't just talk about the psyche. He lived its transformation. He withdrew from the external world to dive into the internal one. And when he emerged, he brought back something more valuable than any status, a roadmap to real power. And now you're walking that path too. The first signs? You stop being easily offended. You stop needing constant validation. You stop fearing silence. In fact, silence becomes your ally. It gives you space to see clearly, to feel deeply, to respond intentionally. And people feel that. They may not understand it, but they respect it. Because deep down, we all crave what the self offers. Stability in a chaotic world. That's the power Jung discovered. The power of someone who doesn't need to dominate because they've already mastered themselves. It's not charisma, it's character. It's not tactics, it's truth, and it doesn't shout. It whispers, but that whisper carries through storms. It speaks when others panic. It stands when others collapse. And most importantly, it listens. Because someone who's made peace with their inner world doesn't rush to fill the silence. They let it breathe. They understand that most people speak to escape themselves. But when you're at home in your own mind, you don't need escape. You need presence. And presence is rare. In fact, it's so rare that when people find it, they remember it. Not because you tried to impress them, but because you showed them what's possible. And that's the final secret of the silent trick. It's contagious, not in words, in energy, in stillness, in example. People walk away from you thinking differently, feeling differently, without knowing why, because you didn't just give them a conversation. You gave them an encounter with themselves. There's a strange irony in it all. How the more you let go of control, the more power you gain. Not over others, but over yourself. Over how you move, how you respond, how you lead. That's the transformation Jung pointed to. Not a rise in dominance, but a deepening into being. People mistake noise for strength. But the strongest trees don't shout when the wind blows. They bend, they hold, they endure. You've started to bend like that, not break. You notice yourself pausing when you would have reacted, smiling when you once would have defended, walking away where you used to chase. That's not weakness. That's discipline. Jung believed this kind of discipline came from integrating the shadow, the rejected hidden parts of us that we're taught to suppress. But here's the truth. The parts you hide are the very parts that give you depth. Until you own them, they will own you. That's why silence becomes more than absence of sound. It becomes a weapon, a sanctuary, a signal. When you're silent, people project their fears onto you, their assumptions, their insecurities, and you let them, because you've stopped needing to explain who you are. The more you understand yourself, the less you explain. You stop arguing with people who don't want truth. You stop convincing people who've already decided. You stop exhausting yourself for those who can't meet you. You withdraw, but not to isolate. To protect your peace, to preserve your energy, to channel it into things that actually matter. That's power. And people feel it. It's not the loudest person in the room who commands the most attention. It's the one whose energy doesn't waver, whose eyes don't flinch, whose words land because they come from silence, not ego. That's the difference. Jung never suggested that you become passive. He wasn't preaching detachment. He was inviting you to engage from a place of wholeness. So when you do speak, it matters. When you do act, it moves. When you do lead, it's felt. Because you're not leading from lack. You're not reacting from wounds. You're responding from wisdom. And wisdom, as Jung knew, is often quiet. In a world of noise, attention becomes currency. But you're not trading anymore. You're investing in solitude, in self-awareness, in depth. And that shows. You walk slower. You choose carefully. You listen more. You've stopped rushing. Not because you're lazy, but because you're aligned. Rushing is for people trying to catch up to a version of themselves they haven't accepted. You're already here, and when you arrive fully in the present moment, people notice. There's gravity in you now, a groundedness. You don't need to assert control because you are control. Controlled breath, controlled focus, controlled energy. That doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't get lost in what you feel. You watch your anger rise without becoming it. You see your fear without obeying it. You hear your ego without serving it. That's what Jung meant by integration. You are no longer a puppet to your psyche, you're a partner to it, and that's terrifying to others who haven't done the work. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't react, doesn't spiral, doesn't feed the drama. So they'll test you, misread your calm as weakness, misinterpret your silence as submission. But you already know what they think of. You isn't your business. You stopped living in their projections the day you reclaimed your own. And now every room you enter becomes a mirror, not because you're trying to reflect anything, but because people see themselves in how you carry yourself. Your calm makes them aware of their chaos. Your silence reminds them of their noise. Your presence reveals their absence. You've become the contrast, and that in itself is power, because power is not just about doing. It's about being consistent, being self-directed, being deeply rooted in your values, regardless of who's watching. Jung's work wasn't just about analysis, it was about becoming. His entire philosophy pointed toward one central truth. When you become whole, the world can't control you. You're no longer a product of culture, conditioning, or fear. You're a product of clarity. And clarity? That's rare. In a world where everyone wants to be everything for everyone, you've become one thing. Authentic, stable, clear. Not for attention, but because you've seen what it costs to be anything else. So what now? Now, you keep walking. Not ahead of anyone, not behind, just on your path. The silent one, the steady one. The one few can follow because it demands presence, patience, and self-respect. But you're already on it. And the further you go, the quieter you become. Not because you have less to say, but because you've said it. Through how you live, how you move, how you hold yourself. No explanation needed. People will keep asking, "What's your secret?" But you won't answer. Not because you're hiding anything, but because the truth can't be transferred in words. It has to be experienced, felt, lived. The silent trick only works when it's real. And most people aren't ready for that. They want shortcuts, tactics, quick wins. But what you've tapped into, it can't be faked. It doesn't come from reading books or quoting wisdom. It comes from facing yourself, from walking through your own fire and coming out forged, not broken. Jung understood that transformation wasn't pretty. It wasn't poetic, it was brutal, lonely, necessary. And that's why so few complete it. Because real power requires sacrifice. You have to give up your illusions, your masks, your comfort zones, and most of all, your need to be liked. You've already made that choice. You've watched relationships fall away, not out of hate, but because they were built on the old version of you. The one who performed, pleased, pretended. But the new version doesn't play those roles. The new version tells the truth, quietly, firmly, relentlessly, and truth, real truth, has a cost. People will distance themselves, call you cold, mysterious, arrogant. That's okay, that's projection. It has nothing to do with you. Jung wrote that people project their shadow onto others when they haven't integrated it. So when you become whole, you become their mirror. And not everyone is ready to see their own reflection, but the few who are, they'll be drawn to you, not by your charisma, but by your clarity. You won't have to seek them, you'll recognize each other, by how they hold silence, by how they observe without judgment, by how they listen, not to reply, but to understand. You're building something now that doesn't need applause. It doesn't crumble when no one's watching. It doesn't fade when trends change. Because it's rooted in something deeper than image. It's rooted in self. You've started to live from the inside out. And that reverses everything. Instead of chasing goals to feel valuable, you bring value to everything you do. Instead of needing external chaos to distract you, you sit in stillness. Instead of fearing the unknown, you welcome it. Because you know, you've already faced the scariest unknown of all, yourself, and you didn't run. That's where the real shift happens. Not in what you do, but in who you've become. And that shift is permanent, irreversible, because once you taste what it feels like to be untouchable, Not because you're invincible, but because you're integrated. You can't go back to fragments. This is what makes you different now. You're not pretending to be powerful. You are, quietly, firmly, clearly. And every choice you make reflects that. The way you speak, the way you move, the way you no longer justify your boundaries. Because now you know, your silence protects your peace. Your presence challenges the false. Your energy speaks louder than words ever could. Jung taught that the most dangerous person is the one who has nothing left to hide, because they can't be manipulated, they can't be bought, they can't be baited. You've become that person, and you didn't get there by seeking strength. You got there by accepting weakness, by leaning into the shadow, by letting go of the masks that once kept you safe. That kind of honesty rewires you. It kills the need for performance and replaces it with presence. Presence is your power now. You enter a space and shift it, not by intention, but by vibration. People feel your depth, even if they don't understand it. They respect your calm, even if they test it, and they follow your lead, even if they never hear you speak. Because when you carry silence the right way, it speaks for you. It says, I've done the work. I've faced the chaos. I've chosen truth over comfort, and in a world full of noise, that kind of person becomes a lighthouse, not a savior, not a celebrity, a signal, a reminder of what's possible when you stop running from yourself. So no, you don't need to shout. You don't need to explain. You don't need to play games. Just walk. Let your energy move before you. Let your presence speak what your words no longer need to. Let your stillness shake the room. And above all, stay grounded. Because the deeper your roots, the greater your reach. That's the final truth Jung hinted at. Real power isn't what you take from the world. It's what you awaken within yourself. And once you've awakened it, you don't chase anything, you simply become.